the long-term left idea and how it has dug and burrowed its way into your home since the 50s. Now, this is a theory of mine, but based off of basic business and economics and control, this theory to me is pretty sound, all right? So now this is going to be a little outlandish. This may be a little longer, but I'm telling you, really listen to this video and think about this right now, all right? So you had the abolishment of slavery, you had the Reconstruction period, which saw amazing growth in poor whites and the black community in the South. Okay, so you saw huge prosperity for about 20 years. Then you had the Jim Crow laws passed, which basically killed it all off. I mean, you were basically a slave, but you weren't owned anymore. So then you had very slow growth, right? After the Reconstruction period, you had very slow growth, if any growth, for a little while. Then in the early 1900s, you standardized schooling. So if you are a leftist and your long-term goal is complete control and to eliminate as many of the competitors as possible and brainwash people into the idea that you have, that you want them to go down this path, this side is what you want. How do you get that done? So you standardize schooling. So now you're getting to people as early as possible, right? So your schooling is literally only teaching you certain things, and they're teaching you one-sided stuff, and the curriculum is focused on your idea. And then you have teachers that eventually turn into, they're basically socialists. They live on the government's back. And I'm not saying teachers are the problem. I'm necessarily saying the system is the problem. But teachers don't want less government because then that means that it affects their pay. But let's just go further than that, all right? This is going to be more about, you have a curriculum problem. So now your curriculum is all trying to gear towards this leftist idea, and they keep bringing it in. However, because cost of living at the time was so low, you actually were able to have a parent that lived at home, basically. And so you always had that parent interaction guiding the kid away from this idea. So take, for instance, in the 50s, you usually had one parent that stayed home. And again, usually it was a mom, and I'm not trying to be sexist here, so let's calm it down. Today, one parent or the other could work. I don't care, okay? The women's suffrage movement happened, and it opened up all the freedoms for women. So I'm not trying to be sexist, so let's calm down before anybody gets mad. But you had a parent staying at home, okay? So you have a parent staying at home combating this left idea that's trying to be taught to your kids in their curriculum. So how do you get that? How do you pull that parent out? How? How can you possibly get them out of that house? I'll tell you how. You make cost of living go up to make that parent have to go to work. As soon as you had the cost of living go up, that parent had to go to work, which meant that the parents had to focus more and more and more on work and sustainability, being able to pay bills, all these other outside the home influences. And now the kids are not being parented as much. So now your school is able to parent your kid, which is how you keep perpetuating this leftist idea. You control the school, you keep the parents out of it, and it creates this idea deep-seated from the time you're a kindergartner until you're in the 12th grade. You are fed socialism and liberalism. That's what you're fed. And if your parents are not paying attention because they have so much going on to try and keep your life good and prosperous, then there's nobody to try and educate you in any other form than that. The school becomes your parent. They're not just your educator anymore. And you all have seen it. You've seen teachers give opinions. And that is where you overstep your bounds into parenting. But if your parents aren't paying attention because they are over here trying to keep your family afloat with all these other outside influences and all these other outside distractions, it's easy to get this done. Look at the most blue states. They are the most expensive places in America to live. New York, California, Oregon, Washington. Look at Chicago. All these places are extremely expensive to live. They have high crime. They have high taxes. They have higher unemployment. And they have the biggest leftist ideas out of all of them. Why? If you also look at the two-income households, those are also those populations in those areas have the highest level of two-income households. So there's no parent at home. It's pretty easy to see. And then you can go even further. And again, I don't care how you live, but I'm always a person that has asked a causation, okay? If we didn't have near the gender identity problems and, more feminine men 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, you had men and you had women, okay? And it wasn't until in probably the last, 30 years that you've really seen this gender identity thing and all these different psychological issues. And I don't necessarily mean sexuality wise. I'm talking about everything. Anxiety, depression, all these different things that have skyrocketed over the last 30 years. And you wonder why. Well, again, if you're trying to control, again, you have to think outside the box. You have to think of a person who doesn't care about the person next to them. They care about control and growth and owning it all. I'm already a multi-billionaire and there is no stopping me now. I want it all. So if you're that kind of person, you got to put yourself in the mindset of that person based on economics, based on psychological profilings, based on how can I get this picture. You have to control as many things as possible in order to guide someone this way. And so I sit here and I go, if you are a multi-billionaire in oil or whatever, and you're like, okay, now I need to go into another industry. I've dominated this and in another one. You get into big pharma, you get into food. So then you start controlling ideas in the FDA, which is Food and Drug Administration. So let's say that we start creating genetically modified foods and things like that that have these other issues in them. That's why you're always looking for the grass-fed, non-GMO, hormone-free, all these different things, but you had all these things going on for a very long time, and they're still going on. And that's why those are the cheapest foods, because it's able to get to the biggest amount of mass. Only people who are able to afford organic and grass-fed can afford it, okay? But to the general mass public and the people on EBT and all these kinds of things, you're still getting hormone-injected stuff. And if those hormones are also interacting with your own hormone levels and genetics and all these different things within your own body, it makes it easier for you to have health issues, which then makes you have to go towards big pharma to get them fixed. Anxiety and depression and autism and all these things have skyrocketed over 30 years. There's a causation behind it. There is. And that's where I sit here and go, you have to think outside the box, think globally on a mass scale. And for most people, it's very difficult to think that way. You're thinking in your daily life here and there. You're thinking of next week. These people are thinking 10, 20, 30 years down the road. How do we go from here to there? How can I get that? How much money is it going to cost, but how much money am I going to make? Is it going to cost me $10 billion and I'm going to make $50 billion? Then it's worth it to them. And if you don't think that that's happening, I'm telling you right now, it definitely is. And a prime example is, why is it that nobody looks at the hormone levels and hormone regulation instead of just dropping people onto Zoloft, Prozac, all these different things? Why not look at the causation? You weren't born with depression. You weren't born with anxiety. Where did it come up and how did you get there and why is it happening? But we don't look for that. It's no different than COVID, okay? If COVID is a statistical anomaly to kill someone under the age of 65 or 55, whatever, right? If you are a statistical anomaly to die of no other comatoriums under the age of 65, why aren't we looking at the causation and the correlation between certain people and their blood type, their genetics, anything that happened in their previous histories? Did they have pneumonia as a child which hurt their lungs or anything like that? Why aren't we looking for why don't we ever look at the problem and fixing the actual underlying issue? Instead, we just mask it. We throw something quick at it, and that is where we are today. I feel bad, give me something to not feel bad. Not, I feel bad, why do I feel bad? And therein lies the problem. If you guys want to talk about a systematic problem, our systematic problem is that we don't look for the underlying cause of why the problem exists. We just try to fix it and move forward. but it doesn't fix it. It band-aids it. It's a mask. If you have a knock in a motor and it just starts, you know there's a big problem. You throw freaking gear oil in and you sell the car off. You can't hear the knock with gear oil, but you know damn well that car's not going to work in just a little bit. And that's a very crude example, but that is a temporary fix. The long-term problem is the motor grenades. Okay? So I hope this kind of sheds some light. I know this is a theory and a concept, but I'm telling you, this video right here you should share. Because I'm telling you right now, you have to think bigger, long-term. Think of the next 10, 20, 30 years. Because if all you keep voting for is today, your kids, and their kids will always pay for it. And you will never, ever, ever see prosperity for your family, the next generations, anything. Don't be selfish. Think of the next generation and the cause and effect of what you're doing today. And I'm telling you, you will open your eyes instantly and go, holy crap, we have to fix course. We have to change what we're doing right now.